I'm Heather at Umi Nami Farm. It is the second day of March 2024. There is still a chill in the air, so it's not spring yet, but the days are getting longer and brighter, and we can definitely feel the pace of farm work picking up. So what we would like to do in today's video is to do a bit of a look back on some of the work we've been doing over the winter and a look forward to some of the work for the spring by giving you a behind the scenes look at our crop planning process. A lot of people have been asking us about when we're going to have our spring cabbages ready, so I'll use the spring cabbages as an example, so that way you can kind of see where the cabbage is in the process at the same time as getting a look at our crop planning. So when it comes to crop planning, we start this, in an ideal world, we'd start in November for the following year. Sometimes it ends up being more like January, February. But anyways, whenever we start that process, our first question is always, how much do we want for each crop? What we'll typically do is look back at the previous year and say, okay, say for spring cabbage, how many meters did we plant? Do we want the same amount, or do we want more, or do we want less? Then for each crop, we come up with how much we're planning to do. In the case of spring cabbage, we typically do around 50 meters for the first planting, and so that was our target, same as always for this year. From there, we need to ask ourselves, okay, where can we put this? Now, you've probably heard of the concept of crop rotation, which means that we don't grow the same crop in the same place every year, and this allows us to avoid certain kinds of pests and diseases, which is particularly important with organic production. So what we need to do is we need to consider, of all our growing spaces, where could we put each of these crops without violating those rules of crop rotation? So just this past week, I finished putting together this crop planning binder, which will hopefully guide us through the coming seasons. One of the tabs in this binder shows us that record of what we've had where. Here we've got greenhouse plans. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Crop rotation. That's the tab I want. Crop rotation. So there's a couple different ways we can visualize this. I'm actually going to show you the second one first. So here, for example, we've got the past 5 years, each greenhouse, and for each greenhouse, what crop did we have in each space? Now, this is a really useful record, but I actually find it easier to conceptualize the information more like this. For each of the crop categories that needs particular attention for crop rotation, and I say that because there's some things we don't really worry about. Like when it comes to our short season greens, we don't really worry about crop rotation because they're not there long enough for it to be a really big deal. Whereas for things like eggplant or cucumbers or other squash family, or the bigger brassica family like kale and cabbage that are going to be there for a longer time, we really need to think about the crop rotation. So what we've been doing the last couple of years is making a chart like this that shows for each greenhouse, cabbage falls into the category of big brassicas. When's the last time we grew that crop there? In the case of this greenhouse, Higashiichi, we last had that crop there in 2023 to 2024 over the winter. So there's no way we're choosing that greenhouse for our spring cabbages. Not to mention that that crop isn't actually finished yet. But that being said, we can go down the list and note, okay, for example, here's a greenhouse where we haven't had cabbage for a long time. But I also know this greenhouse is really wet. It's not going to be ready to plant in time. So I just keep on going down the list and note what greenhouses are possible in terms of the crop rotation and in terms of the current actual conditions. Those two are both very important. From there, I'll just show this for argument's sake. I don't expect you to be able to read my messy handwriting. What I've done is for each crop or each crop category, I've made a list of the potential locations, because I can't really decide on the first pass where each thing's going to go. And so list some potential locations. And then after going through all the crops and noting potential locations for all the crops, then I can start to make some choices about what goes where. Now, in the case of cabbage, one of the factors was we could have used that space for zucchini, but the thing is zucchini needs a little bit more sunlight, and there was one of the space options that's a bit more shady. So we chose the slightly shadier location for cabbage and the sunnier location for the zucchini. In this case, what we've done for each of the greenhouse spaces is we've developed a plan of both space and time showing how we plan to use each area. I'll turn to the page where we have the cabbages since that's our example. So we're going to be planting cabbage in Minami-ichi. In early February, when I was putting this plan together, The place where we're going to put cabbage at that time had kabu, or Japanese turnips, and some greens. We were able to go through and do soil preparation in February, and then now in March we can go through and plant the cabbage. That will take us through most of the summer, and then in the fall we can plant other crops for the winter. And so what this does is it gives us an idea for each row of the greenhouse, what crop are we going to put there, and how long is it until we need to have that space ready for the next crop. So we've got an idea now, how much do we want to plant, where are we going to plant it. As I mentioned, we need to do soil preparation. What we typically do is we make a note that the soil should be tilled and amended with some soybean pulp or another organic fertilizer 3 weeks before planting. We've already gone through and done that. Now, I will also show you the space where we've been doing the soil prep, but let's just take a look first at the seedlings, which is the next stage we've gone to. So, how do we know how many seedlings to prepare? We've always had information about what distance between plants for each crop and other details about how we plant them. This year I digitized all that in this record, which I'll turn to cabbage shortly. So what we do, here's our spring cabbage indoors, planted in March. We have our space target. We have our location where we're going to plant it. Now, in order to get that approximately 50 meters, we'll need 2 beds. Now in each bed, we're going to have 2 furrows. So 50 meters times 2 furrows gives us 100 meters. Now we're going to be planting, we'll ignore that symbol for now. We're going to be planting the plants 30 centimeters apart. So given that we have about 100 meters worth of furrow space at 30 centimeters, do the math, you come up with about 334 seedlings. There's almost never a time when every seedling is when every seed germinates or every seedling is strong. So we bump that up to more like 350 to 400 plants. So let's take a look. This year we divided that planting into 2 just because we had to divide the soil preparation into 2 and we had to time the seedlings with the soil preparation. Here's the first batch right now. So when we ask when is spring cabbage going to be ready, we've been telling people they're only this high right now. This is exactly what they look like. We're looking forward them to being nice and big and round, but this is all we've got right now. As I said, here's the first 200. The next 200 is just finished being sowed. These guys were sowed on February 8th, the same day I was working on that crop plan actually. And these guys were 20 days later on the 29th, which was just the other day. Not even up yet. These are on a hotbed right now. Since it's still very cold, we want the bottom heat to help them germinate quickly. And so these will sit here until they kind of come up, and then they'll go to this less heated space so that they don't get too leggy. The reason these are so leggy, you see here, is because they sat on the hotbed a little bit too long. Hopefully that won't happen with the next batch. But anyways, back to crop planning. So we've got our seedlings. Maybe let's go take a look at the space, and at the same time I'll talk to you about then how we're going to plant them. All right, just this way. It was kind of lucky to have this as a nice example because the planting space is so close to the seedling greenhouse. So this is Minami Ichi greenhouse. I think I showed you guys in the greenhouse plan. Where's that page? Here's that page. So you can see how in the greenhouse plan there's 6 rows, A, B, C, D, E, F. And so right now we've got lettuce still in that row E over there. And these rows A, B, C, D have already been tilled and prepared, and we're just keeping them covered with the black plastic so that there's no weeds when we go to plant. So it's these 2 rows here on this most east side of the greenhouse that are going to be cabbage. So then when we go to plant the cabbage, we'll be going back to our planting chart. This symbol tells us that when we plant, we'll make a triangle pattern among the seedlings. So like 1 seedling here, 1 seedling here, 1 seedling here, because that optimizes how many plants we can get per unit space. there's a column that says, are we going to use bokashi, which is a kind of quick compost that I think I talked about in a previous video. And so we have, yes, we're going to put bokashi. How many drip lines do we need? We have drip lines hanging on the side of the greenhouse. We'll have 2 furrows of the crop, and then we'll have 3 drip lines so that there's 1 on each side and 1 down the middle. And then the table also tells us what type of manifold do we need to connect the drip lines, and any other special instructions. In this case, the special instruction is that we should plant the seedlings a little bit deep. Brassicas tend to like to be kind of like planted right up to their neck. And so you saw how they're kind of leggy like that. We'll cover all that legginess with soil so that they can stand up nicely, because that way it's kind of like they feel more secure, sort of a thing. So that is the plan for cabbage. Not all crops are like cabbage, obviously. There's lots of things that we sow directly on the ground. So we've developed a whole other table for our direct sow crops. In those cases, it's often things like greens that we're planting every single week. And so we have a list of each week. And then what do we need to plant that week? We have our greens and turnips every week. Daikon is kind of like every other week. Carrots and sometimes beets has its own special pattern. So each week we go across and we ask, okay, what are we doing this time? And this all has to go through that same process of asking, how much distance do we want? What spaces are available? Where can we slot each thing in at each time? This is kind of like doing a massive Sudoku puzzle. It's really fascinating and also really frustrating sometimes. But in the plan, we were able to slot those 2 rows over there for carrots and daikon. Daikon is the one kind of raised up, and carrots are the one where you see the furrows underneath the rime. And so those have already gone in. This coming week, which is the week of Monday, May the 4th, not May the 4th, March the 4th. We're not in May yet, thank goodness. March 4th, you can see carrots. Where are they going? They're going to this place, Minami Ichi House, row D North. That's right here. Daikon is going to row C North. That's right there. And so we have our crop plan all set up. It will tell us exactly what we need to do in each space each time. You might notice everything here is written in pencil. That's because there's always changes. There's always something that happens that means we have to change the plan. If it's written in pencil, it's easy to erase it and try again. Now, one thing that's kind of exciting right now is the zucchini seedlings just came up. So why don't we go take a look at those? Oops, what happened there? So, of course, zucchini went through the same process I just described for cabbage. We noted that we wanted more spring zucchini this year compared to last year. And so instead of about 24 meters, we're shooting for 36 instead. And so we did the same thing. We went to the chart. We calculated, zucchini has only 1 row for each bed. We go for 60 centimeters between plants, so we calculated out, and it was about 60 plants that we needed, but of course, like I said, we planned extra. And there's the ones that come up. Yay, look at the zucchini. There we go. This is hope for spring. Those are our first little zucchinis right there. I'm just going to step around the other side here so I can see the planting date. Okay, so those were planted February 22nd. So that was really hard on the heels of getting this whole plan figured out and deciding where everything was going to go. And that was part of the push to get this done, was Yoshiko Uno-san asking me, where's the space for zucchini? Where's the space for zucchini? We need to plant it. We need to plant it. I have to get it done. I have to finish making the crop plan. So this gives you, I hope, an idea of our process of how we decide how many seedlings we need to make, where they're going to go. At the time when it comes time to transplant these, we'll also be going back to that same transplant chart to tell us what kind of plastic mulch do we need to use, how many drip lines do we need. I hope that if we get our act together, one of the things we'll do in the coming month is to actually go through the whole crop plan again and ask ourselves, okay, do we have enough on hand for all these things? Do we have enough rime on hand for all the greens we plan to sow outside? Do we have the right plastic mulch? We probably do, because we reuse them from year to year, but still, pick out the right ones, make sure they're not too ripped. Do we have enough drip tape for all of these places? do we have the right manifolds for all these places available to hook up to the irrigation? If we can succeed to go through that in March, it will make our lives a lot easier later. However, even if we don't, having a good plan makes everything smoother, even if we have to figure out all those details later on in the busier season. So this has felt like a total whirlwind, getting all this all together. And it feels really good to have this in a form that everyone here at the farm can share and look at. And hopefully this will guide us into a really great productive season. We'll keep you posted.